Really, my story started when I was in 8th grade, and I found Gone with the Wind on the library shelf of my middle school, and I read it, and I loved it. I just, it was one of these books that went on and on and on, so I didn't have to finish. I could just keep reading. So I recommended it to a friend of mine, and she took it home, and you know what happened. Her mother just said, "What? You're reading this book?" And I don't even know what she objected to. And she went back to the school and told the librarian it wasn't appropriate. The librarian put it behind the shelf, and then you had to get parental permission to check out the book. And at the time, that's my first incident with censorship, and I didn't know it, of course. I felt confused, first of all. I talked to my parents about it. They didn't understand it either. Obviously, they raised me, so they, couldn't figure this out because they have the same philosophy that I do. And it was my first moment of confusion and injustice. There's something wrong with this. And then later, when I thought about that, I thought, I would have never found that book. I mean, how was I to find that book? It was on the shelf, and I found it. And if it had been behind the shelf, behind the librarian's desk, how would I have known to ask for that book? I would never have known, and that book was just such a wonderful introduction to the type of adult reading instead of the Nancy Drew stuff I'd been reading up till then. So, in looking back, I think I was destined for this. But then I became a teacher, a middle school teacher, and this was in the 1980s, and I had the great fortune of, at the very beginning, of coming into a middle school where I worked with Gloria Pipkin, who was the department head. And we had, it's just one of those things, it's like magical. It is like the mermaids at Disney, only real. And here we had kids who were reading, and this was when young adult literature first started becoming a genre, when we were moving away from the old stereotypes and into this new exciting place of reading. And these kids were reading like crazy, and the more they read, the more excited we got. And we began buying books. We spent hundreds of our own dollars. We had book fairs. It was just wonderful. One critic said that it looked like a B. Dalton with classroom desks, which we thought was wonderful, but you can guess the rest of the story. I was teaching I Am the Cheese. Oh, by the way, let me say, because I think this is really important, that during that time our kids scored higher on the standardized tests than anybody in the state of Florida. Those kids, I mean, they were scoring 12th grade in all kinds of reading, writing, everything. Why? Because they were reading. They were reading voraciously. So I was teaching, I wanted to teach I Am the Cheese, and I had, you know that book by Robert Cormier, I Am the Cheese? Anybody know that? That's such a great book. He's such a wonderful author. So I was using it because it's about critical thinking, and it's about questioning and all the things that Common Core wants kids to do today. So we were doing that, and of course we got a complaint from a parent. We did have an alternate selection policy in place, so the child could get another book if she wanted to, and we talked about what books. The mother wanted The Yearling. It's like, okay, if that's, and in the end, the book was banned, completely banned, even though I had about 110 students and over 100 of the parents signed permission forms saying their students could read the book, and only a handful said they couldn't, like 5. And the superintendent still banned the book. He was a fundamentalist, and it was, largely on religious grounds. And that book was banned. And then, with that great success, they wanted to start banning other things. Why don't we ban this? And this is bad. It was a really horrible, horrible time because they took the words and the passages out of context, published them in the newspaper, had petitions with preachers in churches all over the place. And of course, those are the largest institutions in the South. And so everyone was signing all of these petitions, and it just turned into this huge, ugly thing. Well, the superintendent made he got too excited in his zeal and with all this support. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to have all of the teachers categorize these books. And so if the books have a little bit of naughty language, then it will be categorized as a 1. And if it has a lot of naughty language, then 2. And if it has sex and naughty language, then 3. And then we'll know that all the 3s can't come in. Well, the books that were banned in effect banned, because you couldn't write. Well, some teachers, we for instance, said, we're not doing this. We will not do this. And then the logistics of doing such a thing was just impossible anyway. And so he just banned them all. So Shakespeare was banned, Call of the Wild was banned, everything was banned that hadn't gone through this process. Well, he went too far, thankfully. And when he did, Washington Post showed up, 60 Minutes showed up. You know, it got attention all over the nation, and we became the town that banned Shakespeare. So what happens next? People don't want to move to the town that banned Shakespeare, and so it was hurting the real estate values there. And the mayor got involved. It's like, we can't do this, now hold it. The Washington Post came and did a huge spread on this. It was actually on the front cover of the Washington Post supplement that's in their Sunday paper. And on the cover, they took a hardback copy of I Am the Cheese and set it on fire. I have that. I mean, isn't that gross? But I do. And that, the book with the flames coming out, was on the cover of the Washington Post. And that got the attention of everyone. And of course, Gloria Pipkin, who is my lifelong friend, and she and I wrote this latest book. It's interesting because this is the book At the Schoolhouse Gate that we wrote together about this situation. And we still are writing together all these years later, just a wonderful intellectual and who taught me so much. But she won the Courage Award for her role in this. So after this became so publicized and a lawsuit was filed, finally we got the books back. Of course, this crazy scheme was undone, and we got I Am the Cheese back. But it didn't really help, because the chilling effect had set in, and then nobody would touch anything unless it was absolutely clean. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, because I think that's one of the worst things that comes out of these battles. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that we got a death threat during this time. And I was in my early 30s, and I was pregnant with my second child. We had a son who was only 5, and the death threat said, "Woe to those who put darkness before light and light before darkness. You will be killed one by one." And it had 4 names there, and Gloria Pipkin was one, mine was one. The TV journalist who was covering this, and so obviously for intellectual freedom, her name was there, and then one other teacher at the school. And that letter transformed me in a fundamental way, because I think it was at that moment that you could either, you could go one way or another, and you could say, I'm never doing this again. It was absolutely frightening, as you can imagine, because you don't know, somebody who would write, and the words were cut out of magazines, so that it was a capital W and a little O. Every letter was cut out of a magazine and pasted onto this piece of paper that was delivered to Gloria. And so you don't know if when you go outside, they're hiding in the bushes, and we had protection from the sheriff for a while, but I was petrified we were, for our son, when we were ready to send him to his grandparents' house, to kind of get him out of the city for a little while. That, and then the other part that was so awful was the way people looked at you and the names that people called you, Satanists and other crazy things that they could come up with, like you were a pariah. And I was so young, and I couldn't get it. I mean, what are you talking about? We just want these kids to read. This is all good. I couldn't figure it out. And even now I can't figure it out, but I have a little more insight into it because of books like Dave's, and because I've studied this for so long. So the English department there that was so wonderful was dismantled. They put in the middle school instead of the junior high school, and so the English department was dismantled. And I don't know if they did it to get, how perfect would that be, the middle school? Now we had teams. So I stayed another year, and I was on a team with a math teacher and a social studies teacher. And I kept my classroom library, and another book I was teaching, Never Cry Wolf, was also challenged. It was like everything I wanted to teach was challenged. And I went to the high school, and it was there that I also experienced this discrimination. Nobody would touch any book that Robert Cormier had written, this wonderful author, except me, of course. And people would say, I remember one time I was in the English workroom, it was about 20 teachers, and someone walked in and referred to me as a militant. She didn't see that I was standing there. I'm like, militant? Because I'm really scary, aren't I, with my combat boots, you know. But I was at the school, and I became the sponsor of the school newspaper. How stupid is that for somebody like me, you know? And still I didn't get it. So again, because I believe so strongly that students should have the right of free expression, they should. And that's when they gain the most. And I know that, and you know that. And so that's what happened with the school newspaper. It was a forum for student expression, and once again, they began winning awards. And it was a magnificent experience where these kids, well, as one small example, they wrote about the steroid use in the athletic department among athletes, and the coaches came. I thought they were going to rip my head off, and the principal, you know, said, "What do you think you're doing? You're going to give the school a bad reputation." I am doing that. And of course, what happened not too many months later during Christmas holiday, a kid was shot and killed in the parking lot of the school over a steroid deal. And if we just listened to kids, we would know what's going on, and maybe we could do something about it instead of trying to shut them up. But of course, they felt that got out of hand, and so they removed me as sponsor of the newspaper in a blatant act of censorship and put someone else in there who would control the students. So we ended up, wonderful support from the parents, wonderful support. Ended up filing a federal lawsuit, which I wanted to go all the way to the Supreme Court, but this was during the Bush era, and the attorneys, after a valiant struggle, said that I should settle, and I settled for $120,000. Almost all of it went to the attorneys. I had 4 attorneys, wonderful attorneys. I had 2 union attorneys and then 2 civil rights attorneys, and the civil rights attorneys kept the union attorneys, you know, on track. But with that large, because I didn't lose my job, I just lost the sponsorship of the school newspaper. And so with that largest settlement, it sent a message that you can't do this. Of course you can and you will, but that you will pay the price. And it was, you know, it was worth it to him to get rid of me. And again, so then, in part of the settlement, I said, okay, you know, we'll settle for this, but, and they wanted me to not talk about it, which, no way, Jose, I was talking about it. But I said what I wanted was to be the debate and speech sponsor. You know, you can't get them to speak in one way and get it another way. So we did that. I was allowed to do that. But I remember one time I looked up and the principal was leaning against the door. I had a guest speaker, and he was leaning against the door just monitoring what was going on. Just such an oppressive environment. He wouldn't let me take the students on field trips. He wouldn't let us do anything. I mean, it was crazy. So I then went to the University of Central Florida, where I worked on a statewide literacy program with all of the reading wars. And a lot of my work has been in trying to get wide reading in the schools, and now I'm working on that because I'm concerned about these exemplar texts with the Common Core State Standards, which I hope we talk about in a few minutes when we all can engage in this conversation. So I went there, began working in literacy, forming leadership teams within schools, and trying to convince people that they should allow students to read, and that would be the way to accomplish what we want to accomplish, which is student learning, and not teach to the test. I retired from the university, and I have been writing and consulting since then for several years. It's a wonderful life, except I miss the classroom. I get to go in every now and then. And I am now chair of the National Council of Teachers of English Standing Committee Against Censorship. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about that and about the work that we're doing there, because it just dovetails so beautifully with what you're doing. And I feel just so honored to be here among people who care. Not many people care about this. I know you know that. So at NCTE, we field all kinds of complaints. Millie Davis at NCTE, does anyone know Millie? She is so wonderful. And I just wanted to tell you some of the trends that are happening nationally to try to give you a sense of what's going on there. Of course, you know what happened in Arizona, where the Mexican Studies program was completely shut down and a blatant act of censorship. That's all there was to that. My co-author and friend, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who had several books there, you know, these kids don't get the chance to read those books. And it's just like when I was in 8th grade. How are they going to know where to find these books? They're not in the schools. They're not being given to the kids. They're not being recommended. And how are they going to know where to find these? It's so important for them to be reading about their own culture and to be proud of their culture and to understand their culture. And I can't even imagine how these books could be taken away. So one of the things that we're doing in my committee is submitting a resolution for this. We're calling it the Resolution Against English Only, and hopefully that will be passed by NCTE. I think these guidelines with NCTE and these resolutions and the position statements are very helpful because they have a wonderful website there where people can download these and then take them to their principals and show them that the wider community is against this kind of thing that people are doing. So that was one. I just have been working, and I can't say much about this because there's a gag order in place, but I'm going to say a young woman who had a classroom library, and one of her students picked a book out of the classroom library, and I think this teacher did everything that she should have done to talk to the kids about free choice and that they are responsible once they get the book out of the classroom library and all of that. And there was a complaint, and this teacher was fired. I mean, gone. And there was no due process, and the teacher, I don't want to say too much, but really had no choice. Just very ugly. This just happened. And we get things like that happening all the time. And of course, again, there's that chilling effect. You know, you find that this happens to somebody, and do you think you're going to have a classroom library? Why should you have a classroom library? You could get fired if somebody picks the wrong book. And, and this teacher did everything that she should have done, in my view. So we are going to be working next year on a resolution for classroom libraries. And what are the guidelines for classroom libraries? And of course, classroom libraries should be like the public library, like the school library, and you should have a wide range of materials there for students to choose and read. So that's another thing that we're working on. We've had a lot of complaints on AP, and you in college understand how important this is. Kids are getting to college without having the skills necessary to pass the courses. And one of the things that they need is wide and frequent reading. And we've got AP courses in place, and you probably know that in AP courses, kids have wider latitude in what they are required to read. And now we're getting all kinds of complaints for the AP reading. And you do not have to take these AP courses. That's a choice. And yet the parents are allowing or pushing their kids in some cases to take these AP courses and then not wanting them to read some of the books that are required for AP. So we're getting a lot of that. I don't even know why we should even be talking about that. You know, that should not be something we would even, that a principal would consider banning a book out of any place, but AP especially. So, and then of course, with the Common Core standards, I want to do something with this. You don't have Common Core in Nebraska, I understand, not yet. I have a real problem with the exemplar text, and if you know what that is, with Common Core, they have given someone somewhere in their infinite wisdom has just selected a list of books that are exemplars for each grade level. And I was in one state doing some consulting work, and the teacher there was in tears because her superintendent told her that all of the English teachers had to get rid of their classroom libraries because there would be no independent reading, because what do they need to read? The exemplar texts. So they were ordering class sets. Is this the scariest thing you've heard? Class sets of exemplar texts for those kids to read. And I've been in other districts where they say class sets of exemplar text and classics. I was just someplace where they got a huge grant for buying classics. You know, and not that there is anything wrong with reading classics, but it is narrowing the curriculum to only these exemplar texts or other books that are, and I have come to hate this word, rigorous. You know, rigorous reading, and nobody is talking about joyful reading or wide reading or reading for other purposes. You know, it's all for this academic reading. I actually read something about reading accountability now. So you're reading, yes, so that's the new language, reading for accountability, and that means, you know, counting words, not looking at theme, not looking at the underlying message, not looking at the beauty of the language or what this book can mean to you as a human being. None of that counts. Or even just getting interested in the book. The accountability would be the syntax, what the text says. Reader response theory, of course, would be out the window with this because it doesn't matter how you interpret it. It is what the text says. And so it goes back to text-based answers and the questions that go along with those. I think it's very scary in terms of academic freedom. One of my latest books that came out actually when Keep Them Reading came out is titled Overcoming Textbook Fatigue. I love that title because in it I argue that we have to move away from just staying so closely to the textbook and these exemplar texts, and we need to give teachers and students the academic freedom they need to create lessons that are real, authentic, relevant, fulfilling. And a lot of that is in the Common Core, I have to say, you know, going deeper and making it relevant. And we know that in other countries, Finland is the poster child, for instance, that's exactly what's happening. They're not doing the teach to the test. They're not doing the standardized testing. They don't do standardized testing. And instead, they're having teachers get together and experience academic freedom by coming up with lessons themselves, practicing these lessons, going back, honing the lessons, and then practicing again. And then the kids are scoring so well on all of the tests. So we have a lot of work to do in that area too. And then, so reading, of course, is huge, and then these exemplar texts, and I may be asking for your help on some of this because we need to work on this. But the other is the writing, and of course that means so much to me because of my experiences, and I'm so happy to hear of the work that you're doing here in Nebraska on that. We have tried for several years in the Standing Committee Against Censorship to get guidelines for students' rights to write. We have a guideline for students' right to read, and that's wonderful, and that was passed, and people use that guideline all the time. But we can't get the right to write through, and it all is because of legalities, and you know, all of the school shootings and all of the violence, and the Virginia Tech case in particular, where, you know, the student wrote, had some violence in his writing, and then he went on to have a violent act, as we all know. And so the wording has to be so careful, because in preserving the student's right to write, if they go outside of a certain line, then what do you do? And we just can't get anything passed. So we have tried once again, and I brought with me the final rough draft of the new student's right to write, rights to write, and we are trying so hard, and I know that you do this in your legislative work, you know, in playing the game and getting the words just right so that they will pass something meaningful while not backing down so that it has no meaning at all. And so we're working on that, and that is due to the Executive Committee at NCTE on October 15th. And so if anybody would like to read this document and offer some assistance with that, I would really love that, because we are struggling. We have written it, thrown it out, written it, and of course anytime I see anything that looks like censorship, because you know that language is so close. I mean, you can say like, what is appropriate, you know, or what is the community standards, words like that censors use to censor things. So we have to be careful in our writing as well, not to use those words that they can take and use in another way. So very difficult, very complicated, some of these things, because if it makes too much sense, it'll never get passed. So anyway, So I wanted to talk just a little bit, and then I can't wait for the discussion. I want to hear you, but I want to talk a little bit about what is concerning me the most on a national level. And I think besides the exemplar text, which and the narrowing of the curriculum and the teaching to the test, I want to return a minute to the chilling effect, because to me that is something that is, you know, it's like nailing Jello to the wall. You can't get it. You know, it just keeps moving. What is the other one? You know, herding cats or something. You just can't. You don't know how to do this. The chilling effect is something that is emotional. It's in the heart, not in the head. So you can't really pass any guidelines or laws that say, you know, we oppose the chilling effect. It happens inside, and it happens inside people, and it's based on fear. And whenever fear enters the picture, then we start doing irrational things. And teachers who are very, very much opposed to censorship will be victims of the chilling effect, because there is often so much at stake. And it's hard to say to a teacher, put your job on the line for this, because it's that important. But if everybody would put his or her jobs on the line, we wouldn't have to. And I've seen teachers, I can give you another example. When in this same high school, I was teaching of mice and men, and a parent came, objected to the N-word. The principal then just made a decision without following any of the guidelines that book would, he was patting himself on the back because he said, I'm not going to ban this book, I'm just going to restrict this book. So the book could be restricted to only small groups, but you can't talk about it as a whole. I mean, you know. But this is even worse than that. That's bad. That's bad but that's ignorance. That was the principal's ignorance. You know, that's the best I can say about that. But he came down to a group of 23 English teachers sitting around a long table having lunch. He walked in, everyone stopped eating, and he said, I've decided what to do with Of Mice and Men. I am going to restrict this book to small group reading, and you can't discuss it as a whole group. No one said a word, not a word, except me, of course, which I think was like, what? And he said, if anyone has a problem with this, you can see me in my office. No one said a word. I mean, these are thoughtful, intelligent, caring teachers, high school teachers. And he got up and he turned around and he walked out. And the teachers sitting around this table just kept eating. And I just was, I can't get it. So of course I went straight to, and you know, they said things like, it's just not worth the fight. One person who had been in the censorship battle with me in the 1980s said, I can't do it again, ReLeah, I just can't do it again. You know, and people, somebody else said stupidly, it's just one book. I mean, that does make me want to jump across the table and, you know, do things that I won't talk about to that person. I just don't, just one book. Anyway, to get back to the story, I go to the principal's office, and this is probably what set me up for being removed as the school newspaper sponsor. And he just said, you know, it's not censorship. It didn't matter what I said. He wasn't going to put that book back. He was protecting this parent, and you know, finally it gets in the newspaper, and once it gets publicized, then he backs down. But you know, he doesn't get it. And that leads me really to the thing that I fear most. The chilling effect leads to that, and that is the lack of understanding of academic freedom and intellectual freedom issues. People do not understand, and that's why the work that you are doing is so important. But think of how many of these we have in other states. I don't know of another one in other states. Is that right? There are none. No one is being informed. No one understands what you understand here. Even people who work, for instance, on the committee of the at NCTE, they care. People might care, but understanding this issue is what we have to do. we have to make people understand. And I don't know how to do that. And I can go to places like this and talk. No one is really interested. I mean, I hate to say that, but I have submitted proposals to go places and talk, you know, about censorship. I submitted for the International Reading Association a full day's workshop using my book on, you know, anti-censorship, and I don't call it that. You know, even I say things like how to keep books. That's why we titled the book Keep Them Reading. I want a positive spin on it. How to keep books in your library, how to get kids writing. You know, but if it has something to do with censorship, it's like, you know, we don't need that until it happens to them. And then they, you know, they come running. But so often it doesn't happen because they don't understand that taking a book off the shelf and sliding it, the librarian sliding it under her desk, is censorship. They don't get that. It's just, well, they're just taking it, you know, and we can talk about the difference between censorship and selection. I'll talk all day about that, but let's talk about it, you know. So teachers who don't understand why kids need the freedom to write, why they need the freedom to choose the books that they need to choose, why they need the freedom to teach what they need to teach instead of following a scripted curricula. People just don't understand this, and I don't know what to do to get the word out there. I just don't know what to do. And that is, I think that's the thing that concerns me the most and makes me the most discouraged when I think about it, because we can work as hard as we can, but until people want to hear the message, you know. And if when an incident of censorship comes up, they just say, well, okay, it's just one book. And they don't understand that by censoring that one book, we're taking away our most basic freedoms for ourselves and for our students and the future of education as well as our democracy. Then where do we go? So that's kind of discouraging, isn't it? I don't mean to end on a discouraging note, but I guess I've faced it so much, and I try to be up, but it's difficult. So I just can't tell you what it means to be here and to be with people who also care about this. And I just want to close by, I'm looking, I brought the bluest eye here, and I look down. I mean, I see that, and I just think, we just keep going backwards. But I wanted to read something to you in closing. This is from At the Schoolhouse Gate. This is my heart book. I've written 9 books, and this is the book that is my heart because it's what I'm all about. I opened this happened in Panama City, Florida, the city where all of this happened, the town that banned Shakespeare. I opened the Panama City News-Herald on June 5th, 1998. And the censorship issues happened in the mid-1980s, to a blaring headline, "Teacher Rips Up Porno Magazine." While an eye-catching teaser for many people in the Florida Panhandle, it is, for me, a gut-wrenching reminder of the legacy this school district has created throughout the years, a sharp nudge in the deepest part of me. I read quickly, hoping this time the scenario will be different, but the details are as distressing as the children's faces in the accompanying photograph, which show a torn collector's copy of National Geographic. According to the article, a teacher in a local elementary school had allowed her students to bring reading materials from home to keep them occupied after finishing a standardized test. One of her students brought his brother's prized 1985 copy of National Geographic, housed in a protective plastic bag. He took the magazine out of his desk and began to read an article about human evolution. When the teacher saw the profiles of naked human males at various stages of evolution, she told the boy that the magazine was not appropriate, there's that word, and that he should put it away. The boy was not fast enough, however, for the appalled teacher. He became distracted by the captions on the fold-out page that had photographs of skulls and bones. The teacher decided that National Geographic was pornography and told her student just that, took the magazine from him, and ripped the offending pages into 8 pieces before throwing the entire magazine into the garbage. I put down the paper with a sigh, an audible note of frustration and weariness. How many times will such incidents be reported as business as usual before the general public accepts such acts as reasonable? The scariest thought of all is that even I might become desensitized to such events. Will my stomach always burn in protest when I read about these violations in my hometown? Will I always be horrified? So 25 years later, I can tell you I am still horrified. I'm even more horrified than I was then. And I'm so grateful to be with a group of people who are also horrified by this. So thank you for allowing me to come and be with you today. And we're just going to continue the conversation, right? Thank you. Thank you.